On today's late night Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas escapes Boulder with a win over the Colorado Buffaloes 71-64, thanks in large part to the scoring of your two starting big men, and Hunter Dickinson went off.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. You can find us on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe, or you can find us anywhere you get your audio podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever. And thank you for tuning in. However you are tuning in, we're going to be recapping Kansas, Colorado on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Kansas survived 71-64, the final score. KU able to go into Boulder and get a road win. The road losing streak is officially over for Kansas coming into this one. So we'll get into that. Hunter Dickinson going off. We'll get into that. We'll get into the lack of guard scoring for KU in this one, the rebounding issue that they showed, what this win means, the game trophies, and what's next for KU on today's episode of the show. So Kansas does snap that 4-game road losing streak. And, as much as this is kind of an ugly win, don't apologize. Like, I don't care how you win on the road, especially given where this team is at, right? Like, maybe if this team was coming into this one 28-3 and you were playing a 2-14, or I know those records wouldn't match up, but whatever. Just a bad Colorado team on the road, you'd be like, no, like the fact that they only won by 7, I don't know, they didn't play that great. For where this team is at right now and losing 4 straight on the road, I would have taken a 1-point win and triple overtime. Actually, I don't know if I would have taken the triple overtime just because I wouldn't want to stay up that late. Nonetheless, this was a situation for KU where you just needed to win this game. You just needed to see a dub in a true road game here, right? You lose by 34 at BYU. You lose to Utah, a team who just fired their coach today. You lose at Kansas State by 8, a game that you were down double digits most of the way. You lose a game at Baylor where you get outscored 60-30 in the second half. You just needed to get a win on the road, and you did that because Hunter Dickinson was an absolute beast in this game for KU. 32 points on 13 of 18 shooting. He had 13 rebounds to go with it, and there were even a lot of times where Colorado was like double teaming him, or you'd see 3 bodies around him in the post and he would score anyway. And it looked like one of the adjustments KU made was just saying, hey, you're going to get doubled and tripled. Like, just go up with it right when you get it. And some of those were pin downs where he just is able to catch it. And Hunter always does such a good job of keeping the ball up high and being able to finish from there. He was excellent in this game. There's no better way around it. And that's why you brought him in, and obviously there, are the certain deficiencies on the defensive end and stuff, but his production from a rebounding aspect, from a scoring aspect, are why he can be such a valuable player. And so he was great tonight for KU. I don't know if you would ask the question, was that Hunter's best game in a KU uniform? I don't know. The Champions Classics he played both against Michigan State and the year prior are really, really good games from what he put out there. And he's had some other good ones, but this would certainly be up there. This would certainly be in the conversation, and what he was able to do on the road. And, playing 32 minutes in altitude for a big man, like, give him credit for being able to do that too. Like that is huge in terms of being able to stay on the floor with the presence and everything. So he was obviously the MVP of the game, and he took over and he won you this game in a lot of ways. Now, part of the reason why that had to happen was because you just didn't really get anything from the guards. Now, you did get that late layup, I think with around the 3-minute mark, a little under that maybe, with DeJuan Harris, and that was obviously important. And, Rylan Griffin hit some free throws at the end of the game, so it balloons the numbers a little bit, but just not much there from the guards. Like I said, DeJuan Harris, just 4 points for the game, 2 of 4 shooting. It just felt like he was just kind of floating out there, with Zeke Mayo, you noticed him out there, but he was just missing shots. He just couldn't buy anything. And then the defensive end wasn't great for Zeke there either. Griffin, again, ends up with 10 points, which it looks good, 10 points, 4 assists, but he was 1 of 5 from the floor. Most of his shots, he was 7 of 10 at the free throw line, hitting some at the end of the game. And then off the bench, you get 0 from AJ Storr, which those minutes were a disaster in this one. Diggy Coit hit a couple threes, so I guess credit to Diggy Coit for giving you what you'd hope off the bench. But yeah, I mean, that combined from basically your guards, if you want to count DeJuan Harris, Zeke Mayo, Rylan Griffin, AJ Storr, and Diggy Coit as your guards, combined between all of them, that's 24 points over 5 players, right? That's not going to get it done a lot of nights. Fortunately for KU, you hold Colorado to 64 and Hunter Dickinson goes off. But another piece of that too, I mean, give credit to KJ Adams. I know This was a bad rebounding game for KU, which we'll get into here shortly. And KJ is a part of that. He only had 2 rebounds. Like, you need more from your starting 4-man. That's obviously true. You also, though, in a game where you couldn't really score outside, I mean, Hunter Dickinson had nearly half your points, 32. The rest of the team had 39. For a game where KJ Adams, who I think over his last, 3 games, he's averaging like 5-6 points per game over his last 3, I believe. For him to score 15 points is almost like found money in a little bit of a way. And in the first half, it was doing a little bit of everything, hitting those push shots, hitting the mid-range. The second half, you obviously have the fun dunk in there. But I do give credit to KJ Adams for providing you with some offense from a source that you don't normally rely on that or get that from at a consistent level, because you kind of had to have it from him tonight with the lack of consistent scoring that you were getting from the guards in this game. Now, going on to the rebounding, again, just good overall that Kansas won this game. But if we are going to pick nits a little bit, the rebounding was really, really bad for Kansas in this game. Colorado finished with 46 total rebounds. Kansas finished with 31. And sometimes, the total rebounds can be a little bit, I don't know, not totally indicative of things. If one team's making shots and the other's not, like, there's just less rebounds to be had or less, shots available to be had. So if we look at offensive rebound rate and defensive rebound rate, well, that was KU's second worst offensive rebound rate game of the season. That was a key we mentioned coming into this. That was something we said. Kansas is an elite basketball team when they are a good offensive rebounding team. Unfortunately, they're not always a good offensive rebounding team. They're very inconsistent. That's the thing with this Kansas team. They're inconsistent at like everything, right? There's not one aspect that's like, oh, that's good from game to game. It's like, this can be good. The defense can be great one game. Defense can be bad another game. The rebounding can be good one game. The rebounding can be bad another game. The three-point shooting can be good one game. It can be bad another game. And hopefully they'll find more consistency here. And part of, why winning a game like this is important is because when some of those things aren't going for you, you find a way to win. But yeah, so that was KU's second worst offensive rebounding game of the season. And if you go by defensive rebounding rate, that was KU's worst defensive rebounding rate game of the season. Colorado had an offensive rebound rate of over 40%. So very bad rebounding game for KU. Point blank, needs to get better, right? Very obvious comment there. Also, bad shooting game for KU. 3 of 13 from 3. That is the one thing where you look to and say, okay, and Colorado didn't have a good shooting game either, but Kansas was just 57% on free throws. They were just 3 of 13 from 3. Usually when you do those things on the road, specifically the free throws, like the three-point shooting can come and go on the road, but specifically with the free throws, usually that's a recipe to lose on the road. Fortunately for Kansas, they were able to grind it out, and the two-point offense was a big reason why. You go 23 of 40, in large part thanks to Hunter Dickinson and what he provided, circling back to that on the inside of it. I did think this was a game where the altitude and the time of the game did bother Kansas a little bit. But I think where you saw it was at the end of the first half, specifically in the start of the second half. So if you think about it, usually the altitude hits you kind of at the start, and then you have to hit that, like, get that second gear and get that kind of runner's high. And I think the altitude started to wear on KU at the end of the first half. They had a bad finish to the first half. Now, this team has had struggles at the end of halves and beginning of halves really all season long, so it could just be that as opposed to the altitude. But maybe they were wearing a little bit there, and then maybe you come out of the halftime tunnel, legs are a little more tired, you're still trying to work back into things at the beginning of the second half. I don't know. That's my thought in terms of how late the game was, right? In terms of the altitude, I think it did have at least a little bit of an effect in this one. It's interesting, though, because this win is kind of the inverse of the Oklahoma State win. Obviously, both are wins, which is the important part of this. But this is what I was talking about in the game on Saturday, because I had a couple of people reach out to me and be like, oh, what's the big deal? They're beating Oklahoma State. But you have to admit, right? You see the game against Oklahoma State and this game against Colorado. Both are wins against, I guess you could say, bad opponents, right? Both are wins against bottom 5 teams in the Big 12, right? Yet the level of play and how good Kansas looked and what they were doing, what they were accomplishing, was night and day in the game against Oklahoma State to where it was in this game. And again, it's always going to be different on the road, and it's important that you find a way to win those ones. But that is kind of the thing moving forward, because if you play like it's okay to win a game like this. But if you do play like this moving forward, if you do this against Texas Tech on Saturday, you're going to lose. you better play like the one against Oklahoma State on Saturday. And that one is at home, so that helps a little bit there. But I will say, any road win feels good, especially when you've lost 4 in a row on the road, especially when you've lost as many games these past couple seasons as they have on the road. And even though CU isn't a great team, they are playing better basketball right now, right? They've won 2 of their last 3 and played close-ish with Kansas and Houston, but right before that 2 of 3. They did beat Baylor, who at least is like an NCAA tournament team. And again, beyond that, like any road win for this team is good. The fact that you didn't just crush the momentum that you started Saturday is also good. I wouldn't say that they like raised the momentum from where it was Saturday, but you didn't take a step back. Like maybe you didn't take 2 steps forward in how you performed, but you certainly didn't take a step back. And that's been a common theme for this team when it's like, okay, they get a win that gives you hope and reels you back in and thinks, okay, is this going to be the start of something? And are they going to figure something out? And then maybe they lose a couple games in a row or they get blown out or something like that. You didn't have that in this game, and that is an important thing to do. And the best Bill Self teams find a way to survive games on the road when they're not playing the best. Now, this isn't one of the best Bill Self teams, but you at least showed a little bit of that character tonight. And so I think now, like big picture, there is no doubt this team is going to make the NCAA tournament once again, which I never felt like I really was ever going to have that conversation that they've clinched an NCAA tournament bid in my time doing this podcast. But here we are, and here we had to go after, the actions that happened in Utah, basically. But now I think that is kind of a clinched point at this point. You've set yourself up now in these final 3 games where it's like, let's see where things are, right? You go 0-3 in these final 3 games. You're still going to make the tournament. You're going to get a lower seed, and it'll be like, okay, well, I think we know where this is going. But you found new life in these last 2 games that presents you the opportunity that, yeah, you go 2-1 in these last 3 games. You go 3-0 in these last 3 games. You're going to feel like this team has found a new rhythm because the next time you see them is going to be in March. It's going to feel like they're made for March if they can make some noise in these next 3 games. All right, Game Awards next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Prize Picks. March basketball is here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. You can make lineups quick and easy. You can go between college basketball, between NHL, between MLB. Obviously, that season getting started up here soon. You can do cross sports. You can stick to one sport. And when you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes, no waiting around. Plus, Taco Tuesday deals, right? It is Tuesday. So Prize Picks, check it out. They're going to have weekly promos on Taco Tuesday where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers tuning into all our shows. We'll be back at you on Wednesday to talk a little bit about, I know they won these games, but why haven't the transfer portal additions of AJ Storr and Ryland Griffin paid off as much as KU might have hoped so far? So we're going to take kind of a deep dive into those things. And, I guess we can get into that here real quick. AJ Storr was rough in this one for KU specifically. But let's start with our best moments of the game as part of our game awards here. Start with a good one here. That 7-for-7 start from the field where you hit your first 7 shots of the game. That was a great start. Kansas was executing. They were getting good looks. They were making them. Even the looks that maybe were a little bit more borderline were still going into. It was a fun start for KU. The Hunter Dickinson steal that he takes himself for a bucket, this is starting to be a trend now. He was like, I've seen Flory do it a couple times. I'm going to start doing it every game. Not as cool as the Oklahoma State one that ended with a one-hand dunk, but still was able to, I guess this one was actually more valuable because it led to an and one and put Kansas up 19-9. So that was a big moment early in the game. The Ryland Griffin 3 that put Kansas up 37-28. So Colorado had just cut it to 32-28. And then Zeke Mayo, I believe, hit a couple free throws. And then Griffin hit that 3, which pushed the lead out a bit. Obviously, Colorado closed at the end of the first half. This was probably my favorite play of the game, the one I'm going to remember the most. Flory Badunga had a couple big blocks in this one. He also had that one like goaltend, which was, I think it was the right call. I think it was a goaltend, but it was still an impressive athletic feat that he got there. And then he had that one where he like basically all in one motion, blocked it, pinned it against the backboard, grabbed it, snatched it for the rebound. It was like a block, grab, rebound all in one. Just an unbelievable athletic play that I just don't like. Those are the things where it's like, I've mentioned this before. Flory makes freshman mistakes. He'll mess something up or give up an offensive rebound or something like that. But it's plays like that where you're like, yeah, this guy's different. And once you do tap in fully to that potential and refine the things around him, he's going to be an absolute stud when he is ready to go. You had that one play where it was the steal, where Colorado had a turnover. Zeke Mayo comes up with the ball, brings it up the court. Zeke passes to KJ, who throws down that insane dunk. I believe that was I believe it was over Bangad Dak, the center who was throwing down dunks all day on Kansas in the game. But that was a really cool one. KJ threw that one down hard, and it was an important bucket for KU too. And then, I mean, honestly, like anytime Hunter touched the ball, that was a good moment for KU tonight. I am going to go with that Flory caught pin block though. Like that was just a freaky play that I'm going to remember about this game. Worst moment for KU. There was the AJ Storr minutes were not great. And I mean, obviously the box score doesn't speak well to it. 0 for 4 from the floor. He had 0 stats. He had 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 blocks, 0 steals in 8 minutes. The one that maybe is the microcosm of that, there was that one play where like the ball bounces off a rebound and it was off Kansas. And maybe he didn't know, but the ball is like bouncing in front of him and he could have just picked it up and been like, okay, I have the rebound. Let's go the other way. But he decided to just like watch it drop out of bounds and leave it in the hands of the refs, like who it was out on. It was out off KU. And just grab the ball. Just grab the ball. Pad your rebounding stats too, right? Like that one was incredibly frustrating. All the offensive rebounds you gave up, and there were some that specifically led to, like the one that led to the 3 to make it 32-28 toward the end of the first half. And really that entire end of first half sequence was the worst moment. When Ruffin for Colorado hit that really deep 3 to tie it at 46, like that's the type of shot that makes you feel like, oh, this is their day, right? Then there was that one, you're up 51-46 and you let their best 3-point shooter Hammond just walk into a wide open 3 and it makes it 51-49. And it's like, oh my goodness. This is the worst moment of the game though for me. It was the start of the second half sequence really until about, I would say, I don't know, the 16.5 minute mark or something like that. So about 3.5 minutes into the second half. Here is the sequence for KU. Hunter Dickinson misses both free throws. Kansas gives up a bucket. Zeke Mayo misses an open 3. Then the next time down, Zeke throws it out of bounds on miscommunication with Ryland Griffin. Another possession after the defensive end where you don't score. Then you go down the next time, KJ Adams misses both free throws. Then on the other end, DeJuan Harris gets called for a foul. Then you get down off a transition play, off a turnover. Ryland Griffin misses a contested layup. Then you have a turnover on a play where KJ is trying to throw it in traffic to Hunter Dickinson, who tries to tip it out, and it gets stolen. That leads to an and one the other way that ties the game. Then Zeke Mayo just drops the ball out of bounds. Then Hunter Dickinson misses another free throw. Finally, he made the second free throw. But then right after that, Hammond banks in a shot and gave Colorado their first and that have been their only lead of the second half. That was an atrocious watch for that like 3.5 minutes. Fortunately, didn't end up bad. I mean, better to happen, I guess, for the first 3.5 minutes than the last 3.5 minutes. But yeah, best moment of the game. I think in the end, Kansas got the win. And that is truly the best moment of the game. Lies of the game. This is a new award we're giving out for this one. The play-by-play announcer continually kept saying it was a sellout, and this was the first sellout for Colorado. And I mean, there was at least 5 or 6 mentions of it being a sellout. And here we are watching the game, and there's all these open seats all over the floor. And it looked like there were a ton of KU fans. In fact, like some of the beat reporters like Gary Bedore and Matt Tate, like they were mentioning on Twitter how there were like as many Kansas fans as there were Colorado fans. So like, I don't know what was out of that. That's a good lie of the game. Jay Williams early in the game said KJ Adams should have the green light on all mid-range shots, which he was good today. He was hitting his mid-range. So, maybe this is the wrong time to pick this fight. But KJ came in shooting 33% on mid-range shots this year. I don't have a problem with KJ Adams occasionally taking an open mid-range shot, right? If you get one of them a game, like whatever. And to a certain extent, like if it's two and it makes the defense defend him a little further out, then sure, that's great. But I don't know that I'm fully into that should be a green lighted shot at all times. That feels like a lie. Beyond that, Jay Williams also said there was at one point in the game, I can't remember which half this was. I wrote this down as a direct quote. He went, "Is it a foul? Yes. Is that one that should be called? No." Like, what? But if it's a foul, why shouldn't it be called? You just said it's a foul, so it should be called a foul. That didn't make sense. And then the last candidate for lie of the game was they were showing that graphic where it was like road woes this season for KU, which Kansas did have road woes last season too. But the first picture they showed after showing the graphic was Johnny Furphy just catching a stray from afar. He's not on this team. It's not his fault they lost by 34 at BYU this year. I think I'm going to go with the sellout one. That's the lie of the game. That was not a sellout. It was so clear. It was so clear it wasn't sellout. Anyway, appalling stat of the game, the defensive rebounding for KU was just so bad. I mean, Colorado for the game ends up dwarfing KU to 5 offensive rebounds. They had 18 of them. They had 18 offensive rebounds. Kansas had 26 defensive rebounds. And those are numbers that I think Kansas grabbed like the final 3 rebounds when those were up on their end to make that number look at least a little bit better for KU. That one was certainly appalling, especially knowing Colorado ranks outside the top 200 in offensive rebound rate. And Kansas was coming off a great offensive rebounding game against Oklahoma State. Overall, 3-point shooting for both teams was really bad. I don't know if this says something about the time of the game. Maybe it's just hard to shoot threes. I don't know. But the two teams combined 8 of 37 from 3-point range. That was appalling and not fun to watch. And then the lack of guard scoring that we talked about earlier for KU. And I forget what I said, like 25 points or whatever it was. If you're totaling up the field goal percentage, so to speak, then you would have 4 of 14 from your 3 starting guards. If you added AJ Storr and Diggy Coit, that would be 6 of 23. I'm doing my math on the fly, right? So 6 of 23 from your guards in this game. Just 6 made field goals from your guards. That is insane. That's appalling in a bad way. Offensive MVP, don't need to spend too much time on this. It's Hunter Dickinson, obviously. He was the best player on the court today. 32 points, 13 of 18, 6 of 10 at the foul line. He also had an assist, and he had 3 offensive rebounds, and the rest of KU had 2. So very clearly your best offensive player today and best player overall. Defensive MVP, I mean, honestly, you could give credit to Hunter Dickinson there too. He had 10 defensive rebounds. In a game where you were struggling to get defensive rebounds, he was like the one guy consistently getting them with 10. He also had a block, and he had a steal. Honestly, on the defensive end, I think I'd be between KJ and Flory, though. For defensive player of this game for KU. So when you look at Flory, he had the most highlights, I would say, right? But he ended up with the most stats too. 3 blocks, 3 steals. He was helpful on that end, but also, you know, if he's up against the bigger big man for them, then maybe he's getting worked in a little bit. He gets the highlight defensive MVP for this one. I think the non-highlight defensive MVP would be KJ Adams. He didn't have a block. He didn't have a steal, but he was impacting the defensive end of the court. They had certain possessions where they threw him on Dak, and those were some of the few possessions where they actually slowed him down. They had him a lot on the Rangsich guy who missed a couple good looks at threes, but overall was just 3 for 10, and some of those were really good defensive possessions by KJ. And I think Mike Vernon tweeted it out at halftime that he had, when he was on the court, Colorado had missed like 15 shots that, you know, he was having a big impact on the defensive end in addition to the 15 points. Even though he couldn't grab a rebound. You want KJ getting those 5-6 rebounds per game. You want Flory coming off the bench being that big-time rebounder, and Kansas needs to fix that moving forward. But overall, I think KJ was the defensive MVP, Hunter was the offensive MVP, and the overall MVP. All right, what's next for KU? So next up for Kansas is Texas Tech at home. That'll be Saturday in Allen Fieldhouse, and Tech is coming off a loss to Houston tonight. That was a game that preceded the Kansas game, and Texas Tech's a really good basketball team. They're 21-7. They're ranked in the top 10 on KenPom. Now, they were without 2 of their key players against Houston. Chance McMillan, one of their senior guards, and then Darian Williams, who's, I mean, killed Kansas last year when they were in Lubbock, I believe, the like kind of 6'6" wing forward type. But this is a really good team in Texas Tech, and we'll see what the status of those players ends up being. That could have a big impact on the game, but feels like a game for KU where it's like you need that Allen Fieldhouse magic and a real chance after winning 2 straight to capitalize some momentum and feel like you are turning that season around if you can beat a really good opponent in Texas Tech. And then after that, you got the game at Houston, which, I mean, that'll be a very tough one, and then the game at home against Arizona. If I told you right now they were going to go 2-1, would you take it? Would you take it? If I told you 1-2, would you take it? So you can guarantee 1 win to the bank at this point in time where you know you're not getting skunked. Or would you roll the dice? Ponder on that. And we'll talk to you about that Texas Tech game later in the week. Talk a little bit about the transfers on Wednesday's show, and we'll have a KU football spring ball primer coming at you on Thursday as well. So make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. See you next time for another edition of Locked on Jayhawks.